I had made peace with the quiet, or at least that's what I told myself. In the corners of our small apartment on the south side of Denver, silence became a kind of shield. The hum of the old fridge, the distant murmurs of traffic outside, and Sophie's voice drifting from the living room as she built castles out of cereal boxes and popsicle sticks. That was the music of my life now. Until today, the sharp clang of the mailbox snapped me out of my routine like a slap. I wiped my hands on the threadbare dish towel, already knowing deep down that whatever had landed in that slot was probably something I didn't want. I was right. There it was, heavy cream-colored envelope, silver script curling across the front. I didn't have to check the return address. Only Marcus would use stationery that screamed old money and practiced charm. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to toss it straight into the trash with the expired coupons and furniture ads. But another part, the part that still flinched, when someone said family, forced my fingers to peel it open. Emilia Carter and guest. Wrong again. Just like always. Marcus Carter, the golden boy, never missed a beat. Every title, every new promotion, every accolade announced in bold, perfect print. And me still a typo in my own family's story. I shoved the envelope behind the cereal box, trying to bury the bitterness with it. But Sophie's curiosity had always been sharper than mine. Mom, she chirped, skipping into the kitchen with the energy only a 6-year-old could have. Her hair was a tangled halo from a day of play, her cheeks flushed. What's that fancy paper? I forced a smile. God, how many times had I practiced that smile? Nothing, sweetie, just something from Uncle Marcus. Her face lit up, wide-eyed and innocent. Ooh, is it a party? Can we go? There's cake, right? Fancy cake. I swallowed hard. Wanted to tell her no. I wanted to protect her from the place where people smiled with their mouths and not their eyes. From the place where I was the punchline to jokes no one would say out loud. But Sophie didn't remember. She didn't know. She only saw lights and music and balloons. And I couldn't take that from her. Yeah, baby, I murmured, brushing toast crumbs from her chin. We can go. It felt like betrayal, but not of them, of myself. That night, long after Sophie drifted off to sleep, clutching her homemade invitation card for Marcus, complete with glitter and crooked hearts, I sat in the dark. The apartment smelled faintly of burnt glue from her craft project. My old dress, the only one even remotely suitable for a party like that, hung from the back of the chair. The side zipper was still broken. I would have to shimmy into it and pin it shut with a safety clip. Again. I told myself it didn't matter, that no one would notice me anyway, that I didn't care. But I did. God, I did. I stared at the crack in the bathroom tile as I let the ache wash over me. Not sadness exactly, something smaller, harder, like the pain of wanting to belong to people who never wanted you back, like pressing against a door that had been locked for so long you forgot how to stand anywhere else. I wiped my face quickly. Sophie couldn't see me like this. She deserved more. But deep down I couldn't deny the truth. I still wanted them to see me. I still wanted someone, anyone to say, hey, it's good to see you. I'm glad you came. And I hated myself for it. I used to think the worst part of being invisible was the silence. But I was wrong. It's the moments when they suddenly remember you exist just long enough to remind you of your place. That night, as I sat on the couch pretending to repair Sophie's glitter-glued masterpiece, the ghosts of past family gatherings crept in like old unwelcome house guests. They never knocked. They never needed to. I remembered the last party, the one where Marcus bought the whole family dinner at some pretentious rooftop lounge, boasting about his latest startup pivot like he was Moses parting the Red Sea. I remembered how they laughed when Mom raised her glass to me, not in celebration but in pity. To my daughter Emma, she'd said, her voice dripping with the kind of fake sweetness that burned more than it soothed. Raising a kid all on her own. On expired yogurt, no less. Now that's impressive. Everyone had laughed, even Marcus, especially Marcus. I could still hear the sound of his smug, polished chuckle echoing through the glass walls of that damn rooftop. They didn't see me leave early that night. They probably didn't notice I was gone at all. But that wasn't the worst memory. No, that belonged to the night I helped Marcus land his first big break. He'd been desperate back then, laid off, lost. I was the one who found him that analyst job opening at the firm where I was freelancing. I was the one who reworked his resume, rewrote his cover letter, stayed up all night teaching him how to pitch without sounding like a frat boy selling pyramid schemes. He got the job. I got a thank you card, the kind you buy in bulk. He never mentioned me again. Funny how fast people forget the hand that held them steady when they were drowning. I had pushed all of that down for years. stuffed it into the dark corners of myself like old coats that didn't fit anymore. But tonight, with the sharp glow of that invitation still burning in the back of my mind, the old hurt bubbled up, hot, sour, relentless. I was brushing Sophie's hair back as she slept, her breath soft against my arm, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I almost ignored it. I should have. But curiosity, my old enemy, won. It was from Mom. No greeting, no how are you, just the kind of clipped, sanitized command she specialized in. Emma, please don't make this night about you. Just smile, be polite, and don't bring up old things. Marcus worked hard for this. I stared at the screen, the words pressing against my chest like cold steel. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to scream at her, ask if she ever once wondered why I stopped showing up, why I drifted so far they barely remembered what my laugh sounded like. But I didn't. I deleted the message. No reply. Because there was nothing left to say. Busy. But I sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen still burned into my retinas long after the phone went black. She didn't want me to make the night about me. But the truth was, they had already made it about me. I was the family embarrassment, the cautionary tale, the ghost they kept around to make themselves feel better. And yet here I was, still showing up, still letting them pretend I was the problem. I swallowed hard, reached into the back of the closet and pulled out that damn black dress, the one with the busted zipper I'd fixed so many times I'd lost count. I ironed it anyway. My hands trembled, but I ironed it anyway. Because no matter how many times they tried to erase me, I couldn't seem to stop trying to prove I still existed. We arrived 20 minutes early. I didn't know why. Maybe part of me still believed that being early would make a difference. Like punctuality could earn me a seat at the table that was never meant for me. Sophie had fallen asleep during the ride, her hands still sticky from the sprinkle cookies she insisted on sampling before we even left home. I parked in the furthest corner of the underground garage away from the valet line, like an old habit I couldn't shake. People like me didn't pull up front. The elevator doors opened onto the rooftop like the unveiling of some grand gilded kingdom. The Denver skyline stretched out in a mosaic of glass and steel, and the sunset painted everything in gold, like the city itself was mocking me. The venue was ridiculous marble floors, balloon arches that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and a live string quartet playing a slowed down version of Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Sophie gasped, "Mommy, it looks like a palace." I smiled down at her, adjusting her cardigan. "Yeah, baby. Pretty fancy, huh?" We approached the check-in table where a young man with a Bluetooth earpiece barely spared me a glance as he shoved a program in my hand. "Table assignments straight ahead. Follow the signs," he mumbled like I was interrupting something important. The main tables were clustered close to the stage, each one labeled with delicate gold plaques. Family, executives, VIP guests, close friends. I wasn't on any of them. A woman in black with a clipboard appeared at my side like a ghost. "You're Emma Carter?" she asked, double-checking a list I didn't even need to see. "Yes," I replied, bracing myself. "Table 14. Overflow," she said, motioning vaguely toward the farthest edge of the rooftop past the catering area. "Past catering." "Of course." We wove through the crowd, dodging men in blazers, women in silk jumpsuits, and conversations littered with phrases like seed round and IPO strategy. No one looked at us, and the ones who did, they looked right past me like I was part of the decor, or worse, like I was staff. When we finally found our table, I had to blink twice. It wasn't even on the main deck. It was tucked in the shadows next to a stack of banquet chairs and a rolling cart full of extra glasses. A folding table, white plastic temporary out of place among the polished oak and gold-trimmed linens. A printed sign taped to the edge read, "Table 14, Overflow." Overflow. That's what I was now. The seats were half filled by people I didn't recognize. A vendor from the lighting company, a couple of interns, someone's bored teenage cousin who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I pulled out a chair for Sophie and introduced her softly. One of the interns leaned toward me. "Are you with the catering crew?" he asked, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "No," I replied, voice tight. "I'm family." He blinked, nodded. The kind of nod people give when they don't know what to say and don't care enough to find out. I placed Sophie's tin of sprinkle cookies at the edge of the table like it mattered, even though I knew it didn't. "Mommy, when's the cake?" she asked, nibbling on a breadstick. I glanced at the stage. The staff were setting up a projection screen. Soon, baby, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Across the room, under the spotlight and surrounded by admirers, Marcos stood like a king on his throne. Navy blue suit, perfect hair, champagne flute in hand. His laugh rang out over the rooftop, polished and rehearsed. When his eyes finally landed on me, they didn't linger. They brushed past me like I was a stranger at his party, which in his world I was. They called him a success story, a symbol of resilience and vision, a leader. In me, I was overflow. I sat back in my plastic chair, the edge of the table digging into my ribs, and swallowed hard. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was here for Sophie, that I didn't care. But as the spotlight bathed Marcus in gold and the string quartet played on, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd spent my whole life sitting at the wrong table. Sophie had been clutching that little gift the whole night like it was treasure. Her small hands wrapped tightly around the crooked paper frame decorated with sequins she carefully glued on one by one. She'd even drawn Marcus in the middle, complete with a suit, a red tie, and what she called power hair. She was so proud. She thought it would make him smile. I should have stopped her. I should have known better. But how do you tell a 6-year-old that sometimes love isn't enough to make people kind? She waited for the perfect moment, scanning the room with those big, hopeful eyes. When she finally saw him standing near the dessert table surrounded by people laughing, a little too loudly, she looked up at me, breathless. Now, Mommy, can I give it now? I nodded, because saying no would have crushed something inside her that I couldn't bear to see broken. She skipped over, weaving through legs and cocktail dresses, dodging servers carrying trays of champagne like she belonged there. I stayed at the table, my fingers clenched so tightly in my lap I could feel the nails bite into my skin. I watched from a distance, my heart already bracing for the impact. Sophie tugged on Marcus's sleeve gently. He turned, looking down at her like she was a curiosity he couldn't quite place. Oh, he said, that tight smile spreading across his face. Hey, kiddo. Sophie beamed, holding up the gift like it was a golden trophy. I made this for you. Congratulations, Uncle Marcus. For a split second, I let myself believe he might accept it, that he might see her, see me. Remember the sister who helped him practice his first sales pitch in our parents' garage? Remember the nights I stayed up editing his resume while he was out drinking with his frat brothers? But he didn't. He glanced at the gift, then back at her. Ah, that's sweet, Sophie, he said, voice dripping with politeness so sharp it cut. But you know, my condo's got kind of a minimalist vibe. I don't really have space for handmade stuff. He patted her on the shoulder like you would a puppy you didn't want to adopt. Maybe your mom can keep it for you, yeah? And just like that, he turned back to his circle of admirers, already halfway into his next anecdote about scaling companies and winning leadership awards. Sophie stood there, the gift still cradled in her small hands, frozen. From across the room, I saw the confusion ripple across her face, the wobble in her lower lip, the way her shoulders sagged as if someone had pulled the string out of her. She turned slowly, like the walk back to me was the longest she'd ever taken. When she reached our table, she climbed into my lap without a word, pressing the frame tightly against her chest, like she was trying to hold the pieces of herself together. Did I do something wrong, Mommy? She whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. I swallowed the lump in my throat, so hard it burned. No, baby, I whispered back, stroking her hair, my hands shaking. You did everything right. But inside I was unraveling. Every fiber of me screamed to stand up, to yell, to throw the damn frame in Marcus's smug face. But I didn't. I couldn't. I sat there, silent, just like always. Except this time, the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like surrender. And God, how I hated that. Sophie buried her face in my neck and I held her tighter than I ever had, as if somehow I could shield her from the cruelty of a world that saw kindness as weakness and turned innocence into a punchline. I didn't cry, not yet, but my jaw clenched so hard my head ached. Because I knew that moment would stay with her. And I couldn't stop it. The lights dimmed and the clinking of champagne glasses hushed as the MC took the mic, his voice echoing against the glass and steel of the rooftop. I felt Sophie's tiny hand grip mine tighter. It's his big night, right, Mommy? She whispered, her eyes still a little red from the earlier sting. I forced a nod, forced a smile. My face felt numb. The slideshow started. Pictures of Marcos in boardrooms on exotic beaches at charity galas where he probably donated someone else's money and claimed the credit. The captions called him visionary icon, the face of modern leadership. No mention of the boy who couldn't write a cover letter to save his life. No trace of the sister who sat beside him, editing his grammar until her eyes blurred. Then the applause swelled as Marcos took the stage. He looked every bit the golden boy they wanted him to be. Tailored suit, perfect smile, champagne glass held high like he was about to knight the whole room. He started with the usual thanking the company, his mentors, his team. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, polished like the marble beneath his feet. And then he turned. I can't finish tonight, he said without acknowledging someone very special. I stiffened. Sophie sat up straighter, her face lighting up. That's you, Mummy. My heart thudded. I braced for the performative pat on the head. I wasn't prepared for what came next. The strongest woman I know, Marcus continued, his smile widening. A single mom, resilient, tireless, and let's be honest, so unwanted that no one else stepped up to take her. The room froze for a beat, then erupted into laughter. Not polite chuckles, not awkward titters. Laughter, loud, full-bodied. Some people gasped first, then laughed even harder, like it was the best joke they'd heard all night. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. My fingers tightened involuntarily around the condensation-slick glass of water. I gripped it, like it was the only thing tethering me to the chair. Sophie turned to me, confusion clouding her face. Why are they laughing at you, Mommy? I couldn't answer. My throat was a locked vault. My jaw clenched so tightly I thought I'd break my own teeth. Across the room, Marcus carried on unbothered, like it was all just part of the show. And then, like a dagger aimed at my back, my mother's voice sliced through the noise. She's a used product, she called out from her front row seat, raising her glass high. But hey, polish her up and she still shines. The laughter roared louder this time. The walls shook with it. My ears buzzed with the high-pitched ring of humiliation. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them that. But inside I fractured, quietly, completely. Sophie buried her face in my lap, her little shoulders trembling. For the first time I felt her understand. Not in the way kids pretend to understand, but truly deeply. She pressed herself into me like she was trying to hide from the cruelty. Like she was trying to hide with me. I held her tighter, my hand shaking as I brushed her curls from her damp cheeks. We're okay, baby, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was lying anymore. Me sat there like a statue at table 14, next to stacks of catering bins and discarded drink stirrers, while the party roared on around me. No one came to check on me. No one said, that's enough. No one told Marcos or my mother to stop. They all just laughed. The same people I used to sit next to at Christmas, the same people who used to tell me family comes first. Now I was the joke that brought the house down. And still, I sat. Still, silent. But in that silence, something inside me shifted. I wasn't sure what it was yet, but it was sharp, and it wasn't going away. I thought it was over. I thought they'd had their laugh, their toast, their petty victory. But the universe has a funny way of rearranging rooms without moving the furniture. It happened so quietly I almost missed it. A man stepped forward from the shadows near the stage. I recognized him from the press photos Sophie and I had looked at before the event. Richard Hayes, chairman of the State Education Equity Fund, a man whose name opened doors I couldn't even see from where I was sitting. He didn't tap the mic. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Before we continue, he said, his tone calm but heavy enough to still the room. I'd like to say a few words. People adjusted in their seats. The laughter dimmed. The energy shifted, not dramatically, but in the kind of way that made your skin prickle before your brain caught up. Tonight we celebrate leadership, vision, achievement. Hayes continued, his gaze sweeping the crowd. But we often forget the people who lead from the shadows. The ones who open doors for others without ever stepping through themselves. He paused. Let the words settle. My stomach twisted. I knew that pause, the kind that hangs in the air when someone's about to say something no one in the room wants to hear. And then his eyes landed on me, not on Marcus, not on the investors. Me. He didn't say my name, he didn't have to. There was a murmur. Heads turned. For the first time all night I wasn't invisible, I was unavoidable. But it wasn't just him. From the far side of the room, a voice, small but clear, rose up. I'd like to say something too. It was a girl, no young woman. I vaguely remembered seeing her hovering by the intern's table earlier. She looked like she didn't belong either. Her name tag read Eliana, junior associate at Marcus's firm. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped toward the stage, but her voice, steadier than anyone expected. I know this is supposed to be a celebration, she began, her words delicate but sharp, but I just want to acknowledge someone who changed my life. Marcus smiled, probably assuming she meant him. But Eliana didn't look at him. She looked at me. Miss Carter, she said, her voice growing stronger, when I took mental health leave last year, nobody from the company reached out. Nobody except you. Whispers rippled through the room like cracks in glass. You sent me resources. You checked in. You reminded me I was more than my job title. You saw me when no one else did. I blinked. My heart clenched, not from shame this time, but from something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Recognition. Ileana's voice didn't waver. I never got to say this before, but thank you. You didn't know it, but you saved me. The room stilled, and then slowly, awkwardly, at first applause. Not polite, not performative. Real. Hence clapping for me. For the woman in the back corner, for the overflow table, for the single mom who they had all decided wasn't worth noticing. I didn't stand. I didn't bow my head. I just sat there. Sophie curled into my side, gripping my arm like she was holding onto an anchor in a room that finally saw us both. Richard Hayes stepped back up for a final word. Some of us work quietly, he said, his gaze still pinned to me. But the impact isn't smaller. It's just stronger over time. He stepped down. The applause lingered softer now, but no less sincere. And for the first time all night, the room wasn't laughing. They were listening. And I wasn't disappearing. I was being seen. Really seen. I should have left. I should have taken Sophie's hand and disappeared down the service elevator, leaving them to their champagne and their brittle applause. But something anchored me to my seat. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something colder, clearer. Like I'd finally stepped out of a fog I hadn't realized I'd been living in. When Richard Hayes approached our table, he didn't come with the fanfare others did. No entourage, no performative smile, just a small flat box in his hand. Your daughter left this on the main table, he said quietly, almost like it was an apology. I thought it wasn't meant to be lost. Hey, I took the box, already knowing what was inside before I lifted the lid. Sophie's gift. Her handmade frame a little bent now from being passed around carelessly. The sequins dulled the edges smudged with glue and tiny fingerprints. But behind it, something else. A folded document on thick cream-colored paper. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. It wasn't just a thank you. It was an offer, a leadership position. Director of a new mentorship program Richard's foundation was launching, focused on supporting overlooked children, kids like Sophie, like the ones I used to be. The kind of job that didn't come through back channels or family favors. The kind you earned. We need people who know what it's like, Richard said simply. People who can rebuild, not just survive. I couldn't speak at first. My eyes lingered on Sophie's drawing, her attempt at love that had been rejected and abandoned, and now here it was holding something bigger than either of us had imagined. I pressed the frame gently to my chest. Thank you, I whispered, but he shook his head. Don't thank me, he said. Just take what's already yours. We started toward the exit, my steps slow, deliberate, the letter tucked safely under my arm. I barely made it halfway down the marble corridor before I heard the sharp click of heels behind me. Of course. Calista. She stepped between Richard and me like she had every right to control the narrative. What exactly do you think you're doing? She hissed, her mask of grace cracking under the fluorescent hallway lights. You've made your point, Emma. Don't embarrass yourself further. I didn't flinch. Richard stood back silent, watching. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see the woman I used to envy. I saw someone clinging desperately to an image that was slipping through her fingers. I'm not here to embarrass myself, Calista, I said, my voice steady even. I'm just finally giving myself permission to stop pretending silence is dignity. Her mouth opened ready to snap back, but I held up a hand. You chose applause, I said, not harshly, just truthfully. I chose purpose. For a beat she blinked, just once, but it was enough. Richard gestured to a nearby bench. This won't take long, he said, stepping aside to give me space. Calista didn't follow. She stayed rooted there, arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching, as Richard placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and walked me toward a future she would never understand. And I realized as I glanced back only once, she wasn't angry because I embarrassed her. She was angry because for the first time she couldn't erase me. When we stepped back into the ballroom, the air felt different. Not because it had cooled down, the champagne was still flowing. The fake laughter still floated under the soft jazz notes. But something in the room's foundation had shifted. I could feel it under my feet like a subtle seismic tremor. The slideshow on the massive projection screen had started looping again. Faces in suits, Marcus at podiums, ribbon-cutting photos with forced smiles, the curated highlight reel of his curated life. But then the screen flickered, and there it was. A photo I hadn't seen in over a decade. The garage, our parents' old crumbling house. Me in threadbare sweats holding a cup of gas station coffee in one hand and a red marker in the other. Marcus standing beside me, younger, unsure, holding up his first pathetic attempt at a pitch deck. I was coaching him through the slides, my hand pointing at his mistakes, our elbows almost touching. I remembered that night. No one had been there but us. No one had taken that photo except me on a self timer because he wanted to show his friends how hard he was grinding. But on the screen now, something was different. They hadn't cropped me out. For the first time ever, they showed the whole picture. And underneath, in plain, unapologetic font, the real beginning. The room went still. Conversations died mid sentence. Glasses hovered halfway to lips. Even the jazz quartet faltered for a beat. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I stood there, Sophie's small hand wrapped in mine, watching the people who used to laugh at me squirm in their chairs, pretending not to see what was right in front of them. They didn't applaud. They didn't dare. They sat in silence, drowning in it. And for the first time, the silence wasn't a weapon they used against me. It was mine. I leaned down, whispering into Sophie's hair. You ready to go, baby? She nodded, her small hand clutching the bent frame to her chest like it was a crown. We walked toward the exit, our steps slow, deliberate, the heels of my scuffed shoes clicking against the marble, louder than any applause ever could. No one tried to stop us. Not Marcos, not my mother, not any of the people who had once told me I wasn't enough. They just watched the woman they tried to erase walk out of their room. And they couldn't look away. At the threshold I paused, just long enough to glance toward the stuff near the door. Thank you for tonight, I said gently, not to the guests, but to the people who refilled the glasses, who swept the crumbs, who knew what it was like to be unseen. You've all been wonderful. They smiled back at me, the first real smiles I'd seen all night. As we stepped into the velvet darkness of the city, Sophie squeezed my hand tighter. Mommy, she whispered, her breath warm against my arm, next time I want to make 2 of those pictures. I smiled from somewhere deeper than pride. There won't need to be a next time, sweetheart, I told her softly. Tonight was the last lesson. The cold air wrapped around us, but I didn't feel it. I was already free. The drive home was quiet. Not heavy, not aching. Just so quiet in the way peace fills a space once chaos has burned itself out. Sophie had fallen asleep in the back seat, still hugging her bent, glitter-smudged frame like it was treasure. I caught glimpses of her reflection in the rearview mirror as the soft glow of the dashboard lit her face, safe, soft, whole. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something close to that too. I didn't rush to carry her inside when we got home. I let her sleep, let her dream. I sat in the driveway for a while, letting the silence wrap around me, not as a punishment anymore, but as a release. By the time I stepped into our small living room, the moon was halfway across the sky. I placed Sophie's frame carefully on the shelf right in the center where it belonged, not hidden behind books or tucked into a drawer like before. It wasn't just a child's art project anymore. It was proof of love, of voice, of everything they told us didn't count. And they couldn't take it from us. In the following weeks, I did something I never thought I had the right to do. I opened the old storefront on the corner of our block, the one that had been boarded up for years, left to rot like so many dreams in this forgotten part of town. I painted the walls by hand. I filled the shelves with donated books, old library discards, anything I could gather. I hung a crooked wooden sign above the door. Evelyn's Library, named after the only woman who ever told me I could do anything. My grandmother, the woman who read to me by candlelight when the power got cut. Who told me stories about women who didn't wait for permission to matter. This was for her, and for every kid like me who thought their story didn't deserve a bookshelf. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was ours. There was no opening ceremony, no ribbon cutting, no newspaper article. And I didn't need one. I didn't need anyone's applause. I finally understood I didn't need their permission to be seen. I had already seen myself. One evening, as Sophie and I sat on the worn-out carpet of the library, surrounded by a handful of neighborhood kids thumbing through picture books, she tugged at my sleeve. Mommy, she said, her voice soft but certain, next time we should make 2 of those pictures, okay? I smiled, really smiled, the kind that came from somewhere deep where nothing they ever said about me could reach. There won't need to be a next time, baby, I said, brushing a curl from her cheek. We already have enough. She nodded, content, curling up beside me with her favorite book. And as the last of the evening sun filtered through the scratched glass windows of Evelyn's library, I realized something I'd been chasing my whole life without knowing. I was home. No ballroom, no microphone, no gold-lettered invitation. Just me, my daughter, and a room full of stories that would never again leave people like us in the dark.